In this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a $46 Kels Fight Fixer Commander deck. Let's get started. Total cost of this deck is just under $46 as of the day of recording. Prices were checked using mtgstocks.com. Do note that prices fluctuate, so they may be above or below where you see them listed at in this video. And this deck is 1DH legal, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the commander, who can be up to $5. Kels Fight Fixer is a 4-to-cast 4/3 with Menace, which means it can't be blocked unless two creatures are blocking it. And it has two abilities here. One is, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you can pay a blue or black, and if you do, you get to draw a card. And then the second ability says, pay one, sacrifice a creature, and Kels gains indestructible until end of turn. So Kels provides a lot of utility for us. We're building a Voltron type strategy, meaning we want to deal 21 points of commander damage to an opponent. And to do that, we're going to key in on that Menace and Indestructibility. A lot of this deck is centered around controlling the board, especially in regard to the creatures on the battlefield. And if you like a deck that has lots of incremental bits and pieces of synergy that become exponentially more powerful the more you get to stick on the battlefield, this will be a good deck for you. To get into our deck, we're going to talk about the Accelerants. We are running 9 of them. First off, we have Leaden Mirror and Silver Mirror, each of which can tap for one of our colors, which helps to ramp us early on, but also make for good sacrifice fodder late in the game. We also have Mana Geode, which scries when it enters and can tap for either of our colors. Dimir Locket taps for both of our colors as well, and we can also pay 4 mana and sacrifice it to draw some cards. Unstable Obelisk and Everflowing Chalice tap for colorless. The Obelisk comes with the upside of being able to sacrifice it to destroy a permanent, while the Chalice allows us to dump extra mana into it to either tap it for 2, 3, or even more mana per tap. Lastly, for Accelerants, we have Guardian Idol, Dimir Keyrune, and Silumgar Monument, all of which can turn into creatures, which is great since that synergizes with our commander and the rest of our deck. The Keyrune comes with the upside of being able to be unblockable, and the Monument gives us a 4/4 flyer, both of which makes for good evasion. So if somebody else is controlling the board of creatures, we're at least able to suit these up. We have a lot of equipment we can attach to these during our own turn, swing in for big chunks of damage, and hopefully knock out that other player. Guardian Idol typically just provided me mana, but was there as a backup if I needed it to sacrifice to Kels to make her indestructible. Next up, we have the cards that fit our game plan. We are running 20 cards specific to that. Obviously, Kels fits our game plan because she makes for a big part of it, in that we're building a Voltron style deck. However, she can also provide us some consistency, as when we sacrifice creatures, we draw cards. The Carrion Feeder makes for another great sacrifice outlet, also reduces the cost of that, as to use Kels to sacrifice creatures to draw cards costs 2 mana. The Feeder cuts the cost in half. And Loyal Subordinate makes a great fit, as it's a creature with Lieutenant, so it cares about if we can keep Kels on the battlefield. We were able to do so fairly well, as long as our opponents aren't running too much bounce or exile type effects. The Subordinate is going to be forcing our opponents to lose 3 life per turn. For some sacrifice fodder, we have Dreadhorde Invasion, Nadir Kraken, and Liliana's Devotee, all of which make tokens. At the beginning of our upkeep, the Dreadhorde Invasion is going to drain us for 1 life and give us a 1/1 zombie. We can then sacrifice those every single turn to Kels, giving her indestructible or helping us to draw cards. It also has a second ability, which allows us to give all of our zombies with power 6 or greater lifelink when they attack, which is occasionally relevant as we do run a lot of equipment. So sometimes you can gear up one of your zombies, whether it's the amass kind or one of our other zombies just in the deck by chance, and swing for some lifelink damage. Nadir Kraken gives us tentacles as long as we're able to pay 1 every time we draw a card. And then Liliana's Devotee was the hardest to trigger because it only happens at the beginning of our end step, but as long as a creature died, we can pay 2 mana to give us a 2/2 zombie, which is effectively a 3/2 zombie, since the Devotee makes all of our zombies have 1 more power. Some other cards that make for great sacrifice fodder are Brood of Cockroaches, Mortis Strider, and Endless Cockroaches. These all come back to our hand anytime they die, so we can just sacrifice them over and over. Similar to the last 3, we have Sanitarium Skeleton and Reassembling Skeleton. These, however, we can pay mana and use their ability from their graveyard, either returning them to our hand or directly to the battlefield. Bone Horde is great because early game it gives us a germ token that we can use as sacrifice fodder for Kels, or late game it makes for a big beater creature, as the power and toughness of that germ is equal to the number of creatures in all graveyards. Once that germ is dead, we can pay 2 to gear up Kels with the Bone Horde or any of our other creatures to make that creature that much more intimidating. Hero's Blade locks it on Warhammer and Demonic Embrace all pump up Kels +3, getting her to that critical 7 damage, giving our opponents a 3-turn clock. The blade comes with the upside of being able to equip for free to Kels as long as it's on the battlefield before we cast her. Locks it on Warhammer adds trample and lifelink, and Demonic Embrace adds flying. Additionally, Demonic Embrace can be cast from our graveyard as long as we pitch any dead cards in our hand to the graveyard and pay its normal casting cost. More cards that pump us, we have Inquisitor's Flail and Fire Shrieker, which effectively double that equipped creature's damage. Do note that if we equip the Flail, the creature that's holding this mace is going to take double damage as well. We don't really mind, seeing as we're probably going to be equipping Kels and giving her indestructible. So no matter if she has lethal damage on her, she's going to be fine, seeing as she's indestructible. And then Fire Shrieker gives double strike. Phyresis also puts a 3-turn clock on our opponent if we attach it to Kels or possibly one of our other creatures. Really nice to be able to combo Phyresis with any of our other pump cards, as it puts a 2-turn clock on our opponent as well. Silumgar Scavenger synergizes well with our deck, as every time a creature we control dies, it gets a plus counter, so it's going to get big as we're planning to sacrifice a lot of our creatures anyway, and then Desecration Demon just comes in and it is a big on its own. Next up, we have cards to interfere with our opponent's game plan. We are running 21 of them. To start off, we have Tragic Slip, which is not too hard to trigger its morbid ability, seeing as we're planning to sacrifice creatures. And then we can give any creature -13/-13. Reality Shift exiles a creature, and Murder destroys a creature. We have Cast Down to destroy non-legendary creatures, and Price of Fame, which comes with a cost reduction as long as we're targeting legendary creatures with it. It also helps us to smooth out our draws, as it has Surveil 2. And then Heartless Act, which destroys a creature as long as it doesn't have any counters on it, or we can use it to remove 3 counters from a creature. Ravenous Chupacabra destroys a creature when it enters the battlefield. Control Magic allows us to steal our opponent's most important creature, and then if they're going to get rid of that enchantment, we can just use Kels to sacrifice that creature, so they're going to lose it either way. Ob Nixilis destroys a creature, and if it sticks around, it turns into card draw. And then we have Fleshbag Marauder, Merciless Executioner, and Plaguecrafter, all of which force each player to sacrifice a creature when they enter the battlefield. With Kels out, this can also turn into extra card draw, assuming we have the mana lying around. And the Plaguecrafter comes with the upside of being able to hit planeswalkers as well as cards in our opponent's hands. Gormand is similar to the last 3, but we do have to sacrifice a creature when we cast it. However, it's going to give us a 5/5 flying trampler, and it's going to force each of our opponents to sacrifice a creature when it hits the battlefield. Butcher of Malakir forces our opponents to sacrifice a creature anytime one of our creatures dies. And then the Ruthless Deathfang is going to allow us to force an opponent to sacrifice a creature each time we sacrifice a creature. If the board does get out of hand, we have the Deathbringer Regent to destroy all creatures, leaving us with a 5/6 dragon. Nihil Spellbomb allows us to exile somebody's graveyard and draw a card, and Annul allows us to counter an artifact or enchantment. To round off our counter spell package, we have Negate and Counter Squall, which counter non-creature spells, and Disdainful Stroke, which can counter a spell with CMC 4 or greater. For cards that provide consistency, we are running 9 of them. We have Palace Siege, which recurs a creature from our graveyard to our hand at the beginning of our turn, as long as we choose cons. Otherwise, if we choose dragons, we can drain our opponents out. Mimic Vat gives us extra sacrifice fodder and also helps us to get more of those ETB triggers off our own creatures or possibly our opponents. And then the Indulgent Tormentor, which is usually drawing me cards, but if not, is forcing an opponent to sacrifice a creature or pay 3 life. Midnight Reaper and Grim Harrowspecs draw us a card anytime one of our non-token creatures dies, and Underworld Connections just draws us a card for 1 life, and we can use that turn over turn. Kumena's Awakening draws everybody a card at the beginning of our turn, And then once we have the City's Blessing, is going to only be a benefit to us. Trophy Mage helps us to tutor up our favorite 3 to cast artifact, while Tribute Mage does the same for a 2 to cast artifact. Lastly, we're going to talk about the lands in the deck. We are running 41 of them. To start off, we have Halimar Depths, which helps us to smooth out our draws. Mortuary Mire and Memorial to Folly give us a second chance to cast our creatures, either returning them to our hand or to the top of our library. Mystic Sanctuary is going to return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to the top of our library, as long as we control 3 islands when we play it. Buried Ruin and Sequestered Stash give us a second chance at playing our artifacts, returning them either to the top of our library or to our hand. Lonely Sandbar, Remote Isle, and Desert of the Mindful enter the battlefield tapped and tap for a blue, but if we don't need them for mana, we can cycle them, helping us to dig deeper into our deck. Barren Moor, Polluted Mire, and Desert of the Glorified do the same, but for black mana. Field of Ruin and Tectonic Edge help us to destroy problematic lands, while Rogue's Passage is a problematic land in itself, as it gives Kels or any one of our other creatures unblockable. For both our colors, we're running Command Tower, Dimir Aqueduct, Dimir Guildgate, Dismal Backwater, Jawar Isle Refuge, and Submerged Boneyard. To help us fetch up and fix our colors, we have Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Ash Barrens, and Myriad Landscape. The landscape comes with the upside of also helping us to ramp. As for basics, we are running 12 swamps and 4 islands. Average converted mana cost of this deck was 3.05. There you can see the curve. Keys to victory. It was really important for me to be able to protect my life total in the early game, so use Kels more as a blocker during that stage. And then once you get into the mid game, you start becoming more offensive with Kels and your other creatures. I also found it more important to prioritize indestructibility over card draw. If I was trying to use Kels as a card draw engine, it was just not very mana efficient. I was spending way too much mana recasting creatures that got returned to my hand by them dying, such as the Endless Cockroaches. So use those creatures more for indestructibility, and then only if and when you have extra mana, you can use those at the end step of your opponent to draw some extra cards if you don't have anything else going on. And then lastly, play your pumps into KOs, meaning a lot of times I was able to knock players out when they weren't expecting it. So try to play your equipment and other pumps into KOs if you can, to try and surprise your opponents. This deck was a lot of fun to pilot. It was a very mid-rangey type deck where you're trying to survive the early game to quickly wipe people out in the mid game before those long game plan decks kind of take over. If that seems up your alley, give this deck a go and let me know how you liked it. Here are a few cards I would consider if I were to go above that $1 price point. If you want to see some more ideas, check out the link in the description below. Better yet, share your thoughts in the comments what card you would upgrade with. That way, others can see your brilliant ideas and alter to their liking. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any of the new weekly content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right or either of the playlists on the bottom.